Welcome, fellow storm riders. You are officially a rider on the hypnotic storm. Welcome to session number 46 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. And the hypnotic juggernaut rolls on. He recently fractured his wrist.
Ouch.
He's lost 7.4 pounds.
Woo.
And thinks this Canadian winter is lasting way too long.
It sucks.
Please welcome to the center of the hypnotic epicenter. He is the world's foremost storm rider. He is the Dr. Doom of hypnosis, Mike Mandel.
Yes, Chris, back one more time. And I hope the person who posted a couple of podcasts ago when I eviscerated the poor teaching out there and went after me. I hope you're listening because I so welcome your comments. The person who called me the world's foremost clown, I couldn't be happier with that. Thank you. I accept that designation. I embrace it warmly. And clearly, he did not address a single thing in the podcast when we talked about all the poor technique, the ludicrous stuff still being taught. And he was really, really furious with me. So the first salvo has come from the other side of the pond. Someone has fired back at us, and we are thrilled that the world is waking up, and indeed, our juggernaut does roll on.
Okay, Mike, this brings up a really good topic. I don't think people are going to be familiar with what happened, and so let's expand upon it a little bit. That we did a podcast, I believe it was number 43. If I'm incorrect, it's going to be plus or minus 1 on that number. And it was a podcast on some of the just incredibly weird things that other people have been saying in decades past.
Doing hypnosis in King James English.
Like prop the person's eyes open and start blowing
blow
a fan
in their eyes.
And so somebody had emailed us basically saying, in a short version, Mike's a big clown, right?
Yeah.
And because this was the podcast about other poor hypnotic technique, and the insult came back that was just a character assault without any actual content.
It was content free. What I find hilarious here is he was mad that Michael C. Anthony, brilliant stage hypnotist, probably the best one in the world. He was angry that Michael called me. He said, you study with him for 10 minutes, you know you're in the presence of the Grand Master of Hypnosis. Well, listen, buddy, if you're mad, go get mad at him. He's the one who said it.
Well, or, at least argue with some content.
Argue with the content.
That's why I brought this up. So how often is it that people start picking an argument, picking a fight, and they don't speak to the actual issue, right?
Right.
And so this comes back to your often used strategy of centering them back towards the actual issue at hand. So you could use something like the and yet pattern here, right? They're blah, 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 and yet that still doesn't address the issue, which is, and then you repeat the
hammer
issue,
it home
right?
again. The key with all of this sort of argumentation, when I say argumentation, I don't mean being angry. I mean dealing with data and getting to the truth. Mm-hmm. You'll hear over and over this sort of logical fallacy and this sort of propaganda technique, where what people do with their rhetoric is they can't deal with the content. Now, how can you refute the content when I'm reading word for word out of these people's books?
Right.
So if he doesn't like it, he needs to talk to the people who wrote the books. But instead of that, he gets mad at me and does an ad hominem attack.
Yeah.
You shoot the messenger, you get mad at the person who said it. And this is very, very common. The worst thing you can do is get angry. Mm-hmm. Instead, I agree with him. He's right with all his comments. And what are you going to do about the horrendous hypnosis techniques out there, which is really the point of the podcast?
Exactly. Actually, let me give an example from my own life here this morning. So speaking of getting mad at the messenger, my wife and we would normally have my youngest daughter home for lunch tomorrow, which is today's a Wednesday. So on Thursday, she would normally come home for lunch. And because of something that my wife and I have to do, we are not going to be able to be in the house. There are going to be other people in the house, and we can't be here. So we told my daughter she's going to be staying at lunch tomorrow for school. Now that was
staying at school tomorrow for lunch.
Did I just say staying at lunch for school?
Wide awake now.
All right,
we'll
staying at school for lunch. And immediately she was very upset because she didn't want to stay at school for lunch 3 days in a row. Now, she got very upset at us.
Oh, rightly so, Chris. This is starting to sound like child abuse, as you call Children's Aid.
Now, all I had to do, being a smart person, is have her center her thoughts around solving the problem. So we came up with a simple solution that she would just come home for lunch on Friday instead, when she would normally stay at school. Simple, done. But originally, her reaction, just like most children, was to get mad at the deliverer of the message. Deliverer, is that even a word?
In olden times, used to shoot the messenger.
Yeah, sure. So focus on problem solving, folks. If you, with children, with adults, with whoever, if you refocus the negative energy onto actually solving the problem rather than dealing with the message,
Absolutely.
you will have a better outcome.
You'll see a lot of ad hominem attacks where people attack the person when they don't like the material. And another one that you'll run into again and again is the red herring. And this is a very, very common one. The red herring comes from fox hunting, when they would drag a herring across the track and the smell would distract the hounds. And it's when you are making points and you're doing especially well in an argument, you can imagine that an unscrupulous opponent will often throw in a red herring at that point. They'll try to distract you from the fact that you're winning, and they'll start arguing about something completely irrelevant. My wife's family are experts at this, so they're incapable of staying on topic. I won't name any names, but they know who they are. And if you start discussing something, they'll say, well, it's like protons and neutrons and quarks, because when you, and I said, it's nothing whatever like protons and neutrons and quarks. This is something you've just been reading recently and you're trying to force it into the conversation. Bring them back to center. Keep bringing them back to center, and don't get distracted by those who would abuse your
I love that line. That's just something you've been reading recently and are trying to force it into the conversation. Yeah. That's hilarious.
Learn good rhetoric, learn good logic and articulation, and you'll discover that you will shine above the others. Where are we going?
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about hypnosis here, Mike. So we had a really wonderful email, like a really good question. I say wonderful in terms of not the problem that she's dealing with. It's horrible, and I hope that she can get past it.
But it's really well spelled out.
It was well spelled out, and it's kind of typical problem that hypnosis can help with. And I'm just going to give you a paraphrased version of the email, which was, I have been married for over a decade to a man who had bipolar disorder. And essentially, for a long, long time, his behavior was completely unacceptable, out of control, verbally abusive, especially around the holidays, for example. So now he's on medication. And for 2 years, he's been a completely different person, like the husband that she actually wanted, right? And in her view, she wants to stay in the marriage. But again, coming back to things like the holidays, she can't help but have these old anchors fire in her mind that bring her back to this time when he was verbally abusive, unacceptable, out of control.
So are you saying that just by going on holiday with him, it starts to remind her about the bad holidays before?
I mean, the email, she just gave the example of holidays, but obviously this is happening regularly where she has, in her mind, she used the word cognitively forgiven him, but hasn't seemed to shake the emotional attachment to this past.
Okay, well, that makes sense here, because that's often the case. Forgiveness is an act of the will. The feelings follow as you consistently do it. And here, you clearly have a case where the person had a difficulty, in this case, diagnosed bipolar disease. They used to call it manic depression. And now he is medicated to the point, whatever medication he's on, that is no longer an issue with him. And now she's got the problem.
Exactly.
So the problem is she's now living in the past with this stuff that no longer exists.
And she doesn't want to.
Right. So she has been clearly traumatized, I would say, by what's happened in the past. And it's given her all of these new patterns, which are bad anchors tied to his previous state. And she needs to get those anchors out of there.
Now, I want to mention that anybody listening to this can probably understand that you don't need to be married to someone with manic depression or bipolar to relate to, for example, a constant series of ongoing arguments that you used to have where perhaps somebody said very hurtful things to you in the past. It could be anything that somehow you can't shake and you keep coming back to, even though it's not an actual problem today.
Right. It can be anything that is continuously bothering you. I mean, even a phobia is problematic in the sense that it's a memory disruption. People are reacting now to something that happened a long time ago, an initial sensitizing event. So in this case, there's many, many ways of treating this. She can be de-traumatized by somebody who can use faster EFT or be set free fast or one of the other modalities. Get rid of the root of this and then build in some resourceful states and connect them to her husband. I would think in this case, if she finds a good hypnotherapist and someone skilled in different modalities as well, her ability to recover from this quickly would be very, very high. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And also the idea of using NLP and some modality shifts and doing some of the new code exercises, personal edits. You could probably, if you were to meet up with somebody who understood some of this stuff and guided you through the process, you could probably take care of it.
Yes,
quite quickly.
Yes, and remember, I said earlier when we were in a discussion for our live webinar with our students, our online students, that when you fall in love with someone, you take all their best qualities and you build the submodalities. You make the pictures of them in your head, bright, colored, close, 3D, vibrant, and you take all their bad stuff and make it black and white and grainy and tiny and push it into the distance. And when we fall out of love with someone, we tend to dramatize their bad traits by doing the exact opposite. We take all the bad things, the leaving the toothpaste lid off, make that huge color in our face there all the time, vibrant, annoying with lots of sound, full choir singing. And we take their great qualities and minimize those, make them black and white, grainy, and so on, and push them into the distance. And you have to reverse this. In fact, one of the most powerful things you can do, and when I was the relationship coach on CBC television for 2 years on the Stephen and Chris show, we were talking about this in the green room afterwards, a number of us. And I said, one of the most important things you can do, I told this newly married woman, is you and your husband maintain your marriage. I mean, I've been married 32 years. It takes work, but it's worth it because your relationship deepens over time. But one thing any newly married couple can learn to do is a garbage technique, a garbage dump technique. When you go to bed at night, take all the great stuff of that day, bring it nice and close, make the pictures 3D, color, vibrant, in your face, make them moving if necessary, add a great soundtrack, and take all the bad stuff and all the stuff that annoyed you about your spouse and shrink it down and make it grainy and black and white and stick it in the distance where you can barely see it. And as you do this habitually over time, you won't have to do it anymore because your unconscious mind will do that at the end of the day. And guess what? You'll discover you're both a lot happier in your lives and a lot happier in your relationship.
Okay, let's just break this down a little bit for people who are hearing words like submodality shifts for the first time. So you said, when you first get in a relationship with someone, you tend to make pictures of all the great things that are bright and up close and colorful and all that. Well,
this is all done unconsciously.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. Is you don't actually close your eyes and go, okay, I want to imagine her, all close and beautiful and bright. No, it happens. And how was this all discovered? Bandler and Grinder, in modeling 3 separate therapists, discovered that they could ask people a series of questions like,
right.
Well, what do you think of what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel when you think of
How do you know you're
so-and-so?
mad at him? Well, I see a picture of him doing that. Well, how close is the picture? I don't know. Well, if you did know, well, it's real close and it's color. And they elicited these. I think Bandler was the one mostly behind the discovery of submodalities, as Bandler and Grinder worked with Virginia Satir, Fritz Perls, and Milton Erickson. And Bandler brought in most of the work on submodalities. But the problem I have with classic code NLP, which is mostly the Bandlerian stream, and hear me, folks, I'm not taking a shot at it at all. I'm certified in it. I studied it. In fact, I did a training with Richard Bandler, a short one, but I did one. And his stuff is great. But what I start to see as a flaw, or at least an incompleteness in the Bandlerian strains of NLP, is how many different ways can you shift submodalities? I mean, that's what it starts to become after a while with timelines and all of these different things. Whereas John Grinder brought in with his NLP new code, which I think is a superior form of NLP, he brought in a lot of body motion and breathing shifts as well that create high performance states. Definitely. And the submodalities shift as a result of this rather than shifting them directly.
Right. So to boil it down, people don't consciously make these visualizations or hear things or say things to themselves. But when they're asked questions about, well, how do you know that you're in love? How do you know that you like this person? How do you know what picture do you see exactly? How close, how far is it in focus or not? They make up answers that seem to fit with what's going on in their brain. And people have found out, oh, okay, well, it tends to work that way. People that love other people tend to see them in this certain way, very close and
any experience that is closer, brighter, 3D, most of the time, in fact, an overwhelmingly high percentage of the time, will intensify an experience.
Right.
And when you shrink it, make it black and white grainy, you put a frame around it, stick it on a wall, all of those things will typically tend to reduce the emotional charge.
And so this is the two sides of the loop. You're unconsciously doing these things that result in these images or sounds or whatever that match the feelings that you have. And if you go after the images and the sounds and the feelings directly, consciously, you can change the way you feel about things.
Absolutely.
Right? So just like the idea of, what do we say in hypnosis? Everything that assumes trance causes trance.
Clark Hull, yep.
1933.
That's
so
correct.
you can go in, and if you need a supposed a cataleptic limb to produce a medium trance, you go in and you create a cataleptic limb, uses something like the little shelf induction.
Well, if you need a medium trance to supposedly, you need a medium trance to create a cataleptic limb. You can do it the other way around. Just create the cataleptic limb and automatically have this medium trance, whatever that is.
Right, which we're getting into a little bit more.
So you're saying, Chris, here, as behavior changes and so on and feelings change, the submodalities will shift.
Right.
Likewise, by changing the submodalities themselves, the building blocks of human experience, we have to have ways of codifying experience so we know what things mean, whether we like things, whether we don't like them, even when things happen. How do you know you ate breakfast this morning and not 15 years ago? You have to have a way of codifying time. All of these are done through submodalities. So by changing the submodalities, we likewise shift our representation and our feelings around those things.
Excellent. I think you said that way more
Thank you.
clearly than I could have. So thank you. Wonderful. Now, where are we going from here? So in the end, absolutely, if you're dealing with someone who was dealing with bipolar and they're over that and you have to overcome your past traumatized memory of this, you can do it with NLP, hypnosis, faster EFT, etc. So time to move on. Next question. So let's just remind everybody as well while we're at it here. Since we got into some discussion of hypnosis, we have a live training coming up in hypnosis. Mike is teaching the architecture of hypnosis the week of May 12th. That's a Monday to a Friday. So May 12th through the 16th.
St. Michael's College, University of Toronto.
And it is going to sell out. There are only about 8 spots left at this time.
And as we're speaking, we're recording this on January 28th, I believe it is.
Yeah.
So there will be fewer by the time you hear this. But if you want to come out and study with us, we have people coming from Texas, Arizona, Norway, France. It's going to be an absolute blast. Come and study with us for a week. Check out our website, MikeMandelHypnosis.com, and click on training.
And while we're at it, of course, the other half of the commercial is the online Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy. If you can't make it to Toronto, we have been having a blast doing monthly webinars for our students, recording really awesome content. We just got a comment in the webinar today from Michael saying that this is the best course that he has ever taken.
Wonderful of him to say that.
We love hearing this stuff, and that's why we created the online academy.
With over 250 high-def videos for you in bite-sized pieces.
Oh, and more being added all the time. So it's incredible. Anyway, the reason why I brought it up is when we created the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, I was adamant about the idea of not just shipping people a box of DVDs like some other people. We wanted to have a living, breathing course where we interact with you. We respond to your feedback. We can add new training.
We give you cheat sheets. We give you audio commentaries on what we've done. We do live webinars. So it is very complete, or at least comprehensive, worldwide hypnosis community. Join our hypnotic storm riders.
MikeMandelHypnosis.com/academy. So let's talk about... I mentioned connecting the dots, and we had a conversation about language patterns that involves using the phrase.
Oh, that's a great one. A tremendous language pattern.
We want to throw these in here for people on the podcast because they're fun, right?
Language fun.
What is a language pattern?
It's a little snippet of language that works as a tool you can use in different situations. And you hear Chris typically say things, and yet, which is one of our patterns that leads the person into considering something completely new.
Mike teaches tons of these in the online academy.
Correct.
Just FYI.
And to corporate clients, who love it. But one of the patterns is, I think you'll discover when you connect the dots. Now, I love this pattern because it implies a causative element. It implies cause and effect. So if you say something like, I think you'll discover when you connect the dots that Dave has been attempting to undermine you for 2 years. Whoa! Now, you'd only do that if it was true. But the implication is that you have seen this connection from Dave's behavior going all the way back to some other point that this person could also see. And guess what will happen? They will unconsciously connect the dots back. It is impossible to connect the dots forward, Steve Jobs. Mm-hmm. But we can connect them looking back immediately. Like if I think back to how I met my wife and wound up marrying her, it's insane. If I tried to connect it forward and see, it would be impossible. But I can connect the dots backwards, which you can do unconsciously really quick, and realize the reason I'm sitting here talking to Chris now and married to the woman I'm married to now is because in 1977, my manager at the time was in a bar in Florida, saw a hypnosis show, and the guy said he wanted to do a big stage show to turn the stage into the bridge of a starship, because this was in the middle of Star Wars and Star Trek and all that being especially popular. My manager got this idea. We built this set. We took this thing on the road, and we had a sound crew. And the sound and lighting crew, Audience Audio, their sister was my wife. And we met through a chance opportunity of my manager walking into a certain bar in Florida that night. If he had not, I wouldn't be married to her now. My life would be different. Said, connect the dots backwards.
So what you're saying is we all have these experiences of connecting the dots
backwards,
in our past,
but we can't connect them forwards.
So if you use it in a language pattern, I think you'll discover when you connect the dots that ...
Yes.
whatever it is,
you'll discover
because of habit, because of the brain. I think Cialdini calls it the click-whir principle, right?
Like
the click-whir,
fires the program.
Yeah, it just fires this automatic program, which is designed
because your brain is a self-patterning system.
And I think the way he phrased it in his book, Influence the Psychology of Persuasion. That's the title? Yes. I always mix up the influence and the persuasion part. Anyway, that the brain is a shortcut machine much of the time. So if it has a pattern that it can follow that generally works most of the time,
of course,
it will follow that pattern.
Of course it will.
Which is why you can do these things, these language patterns. So I think you'll discover when you connect the dots that using these language patterns has become a natural part of your life.
And I think you'll discover when you connect the dots, Chris, that you'll find even more ways to apply all of these language patterns in your life in a way that's concomitant with your life goals.
That's right. All right. What else do you want to talk
Chris,
about?
We're wrapping. We're 27 minutes, 18 seconds here. So let's go to the empowering question.
Let's do it. Oh, it's a good one.
Here's today's empowering question. I'll say it twice as usual. Let this resonate. For someone out there, this is exactly what you need to hear right now. What is your greatest talent, your absolute greatest talent, and how are you going to use it for the benefit of others? What is your absolute greatest talent, and how are you going to use it for the benefit of others? And I think this should lead us to the closing metaphor, Chris.
I think it should. That was a really good question. So let's hear the metaphor. I think you've got something for us.
Yes. I call this the early warning system. And you've never heard this.
No.
Another true story. When I was growing up, Chris, in Toronto and going to Earl Beatty Public School, when I was about age 9, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. John F. Kennedy was president, and Fidel Castro was bringing Russian missiles in across the Atlantic, up from Murmansk or whatever in the Soviet Union, and placing them in launching positions in Cuba, which would enable them to hit the south coast of the United States, the Gulf of Mexico area, Texas Panhandle, very, very easily. And these were nuclear weapons. And regardless of one's politics, it was a very, very dicey time to be alive. And I can remember in school being told that Kennedy was standing up to Castro and Khrushchev and saying, get the missiles out. The U.S. put a blockade there to stop them and told them to remove them. And the world literally teetered on the brink of nuclear war. I remember it. I remember my mom being afraid, having gone through the Manchester Blitz and seeing this happening at a far greater level. And I remember them testing the air raid sirens in Toronto. Who would have thought of such a thing? We did duck and cover. We had to hide under our desk when the teacher told us, if you see the flash, cover your eyes, get down below, the level of your desk, because the blast follows and then the heat wave. It was terrifying for kids. And around this time, I remember them running something called the Conelrad Early Warning System, or the Conelrad Warning System, on local radio. And they would just say, out of the blue, the following is a test of the Conelrad system. And you just go silent, and then you hear this beeping sound on the radio. There'll be a pause, then they do it again. They say, if this had been an actual emergency, you would be told what to do and where to go and so on. They're testing this emergency broadcast system, which was really, really scary because we keep thinking hydrogen bombs. Well, time went on and we forgot about all this. And in the early 1980s, much later, a TV show came on called Yan Can Cook in Toronto and I guess across Canada. I think it was run out of Vancouver. And it was a Chinese man who was an amazing chef who cooked with a wok. And he taught people to use a wok, which was just becoming popular at the time for single pan meals. And occasionally I'd watch it, and it was very funny and very entertaining. And he'd start every show with a completely politically incorrect. He'd go, hello, so he couldn't say hello. But he was saying it, so I guess he got away with it. And this show went on for quite a while, a couple of years at least. Well, the interesting thing is, Chris, one night, really late, I was watching TV in the apartment before I got married. So this would be pre-1981 or maybe early 1981 at the very latest. And so I was watching a program and a commercial came on but it wasn't a commercial. It was a Conrad warning thing. And it was this guy, Yan. And he was cooking in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, there was a flash outside the window. He ducked down under the desk, put the wok over his head.
Wow.
And it said, when you see the flash, duck and cover. And then the last words were, it can happen here. And I never, ever saw that again. I don't know if it was a test. I don't know if it was put out by accident that night. But the warning was, it can happen here.
This has been episode 46 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel and Chris Thompson. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for our next podcast, number 47, coming up in a couple of weeks. And if you're interested in learning more about hypnosis, language patterns, NLP, influence, persuasion, self-improvement, all of these things, check out MikeMandelHypnosis.com/academy, where we have put together the world's finest online hypnosis training. Or if you're up to a trip to Toronto, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class, where we're holding our next Architecture of Hypnosis class, May 12th to 16th. See you in the next podcast.
Yes, we will. Mr. Thompson, I heard tell you the story about Luke McDowell and the oyster shucking contest.
No, that's a new one to me. Tell me.
Very good one. As you know, I mentioned earlier that when Bryce Morgan dressed as Chung Ling Soo and contrived to decapitate Henry Squatter purely for the humor, well, there were many, many stories prior to that. And one of my very favorites was in Galway, Ireland. The Irish Guards had an oyster shucking contest every single year, and they always won it because Galway was notable for its remarkable oysters. And they had their champion. It was this Sergeant Luke McDowell, and they put him forward against all the other regiments. And I remember the entire shucking contest happening. It happened on his birthday as well, which was a very nice thing. So we all wanted to say happy birthday, Luke. And we went down to see the contest. And the Irish were very, very good with the oysters. They had these nice blunt knives for prying them open with a little wooden trough. They held it down with a cloth on the table. And we were all sitting there watching. Bryce Morgan said, damn it, I wish someone was good enough at shucking oysters to beat this damn Luke McDowell. And Henry Squatter said, well, maybe I'll have a go. Which, of course, was the entire point. And he said, well, I need one of those knives. And Morgan said, have you ever done this before? He said, no. He said, well, let me tell you the trick to it. The key is you don't use a knife. Those things are too damn blunt. You use a straight razor. He said, I've got one here for you. He handed him a straight razor, and he said, don't use a cloth and a table like these Irish people are. He said, the key is to trap it between your legs. Get the razor blade in there and pry the damn thing open. And Squatter said, I think I can manage that. Well, Luke McDowell had gone through about 8 dozen oysters that morning for his birthday. Everyone was amazed at the speed of this chap. He's a wonderfully amazing fellow. And Squatter signed up for the first round of the contest. Well, it turned out there was no other round because it ended in a horrible accident. Squatter opened the straight razor, and they fired the gun. He held the oyster, clamped it between his thighs, attempted to pry it open with the razor. And somehow it slipped, and it managed to sever his glands. We got him to the infirmary, and Luke was very nice and brought him some oysters. And I just saw Bryce Morgan. What a brilliant joke. I mean, just the funniest chap. I mean, you imagine that. The Squatter's wife didn't see the humor in it at all.
Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. Head on over to iTunes, leave a rating for the show, and write a review. We'd love to see your hopefully 5-star review for the Brain Software Podcast. Make sure you head on over to our website as well, Mike Mandel, hypnosis.com, because we have an email opt-in form there where you can get all kinds of amazing stuff,
cool stuff that's free.
Including Mike's ebook, Brain Software, the ebook edition, which is probably the most important thing you're going to love because it has all of the same content that Mike gets paid thousands of dollars to deliver in corporate keynote sessions. And this is absolutely amazing stuff. And of course, there's tons and tons of other stuff, but you'll see it on the website. You'll see what you're going to get. And if you're interested in hypnosis training, learning all kinds of cool stuff, whether online or in live classroom, make sure you visit the website. You're going to see our online Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, which is incredible. And if you just check out all the stuff you'll get in the first month, you will love it.
Students all around the world.
And you can come and study with us in Toronto anytime as well.
Join our community. And the next Architecture of Hypnosis 5-day live training will be occurring in May 2014 at the University of Toronto. And we hope to see you there. Check our website for more details. Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. Oh, I do like to be beside the sea. Oh, I do like to stroll along the prom as the brass band plays tiddly-um-pum-pum. Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. Oh, I do like to be beside the sea. And da-da-dee-dee-dum-dee-dum-da-da-dee-dum-da, beside the seaside. Beside the sea, have a banana, the seaside, beside the sea. Chris has got a cough, the seaside, beside the sea.
Where do you get this stuff?